Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next episode in our series of the quintessential bulletproof practice owner's manual for success. Hopefully, you appreciated the previous episode, took lots of notes, did some homework. Now, get ready to do some more work on your business. Get out pad and paper and let's go. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Private Practice Owners Club and our next episode in the Practice Owners Manual series. If you've been listening this far chronologically, week after week, you know, we're on, I think this is number 7 in our series of episodes. And last time we talked about the PCC, patient care coordinator, person at the front desk. This episode, and in concurrence with the next episode, so this is going to be a 2-part series here, this one and the next one, where we're going to talk about practice management. This one, we're going to talk a little bit more about the fundamental practice organization and like the manuals that you want to create. Next time, we'll talk about the management of the employees, the team, human resources related issues. Well, but this one is going to be a little bit more about how to structure, organize, and put some of our documents and important things together to make sure we're nicely organized and structured, right? So, Adam, thanks for coming back again. Appreciate it, bro.
Yeah, man. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, like you've said before on previous episodes, this is time to get out pen and paper. Next page on the notebook. This is practice management. Today we're going to be talking about stuff like organizational board. We're going to talk about policy and procedures. We're going to talk about job descriptions, some of that stuff that can be a little bit hairy, right? Because a lot of people are like, well, I don't know where to start. And I definitely didn't know where to start when I had my practice, but we're going to get into some of that stuff, which can be some of the grind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody has time to do this stuff, you know? I the hard part about this is that this is where most people get stuck.
I totally agree.
This is where most people get stuck. This is the bulk of practice owners in our country, right? And it's just people who are busy, too busy, and not organized enough, right? They're not tightened up on who does what, when, where, why, what the roles and responsibilities are of people on their team, and checklists and sequences of how to get things done. And it takes some brain work to actually like step out of the business and put this down on paper and to deliver it in a way that's valuable for your team. So this is really important.
Yeah, one of the reasons why E-Myth Revisited, the book, is so popular is because it speaks exactly to this point that we're talking about today. It is the small business owner's problem, issue, conundrum, in that they end up spinning their wheels covering all the different aspects of their company, uh, and then get burned out because they haven't taken the time to do the things that we're talking about today. It's common. And I think it's common because of that entrepreneurial mindset. We get the shiny object syndrome. We
Yeah.
got the next bright idea. Like, I need to work on this next bright idea. That's where all the money's going to be. I don't have time to work on the important stuff that's my bread and butter. But this is exactly where that starts. This is how you create the foundation of your company. And it hurts me a little bit because so many owners want to grow and expand and get a new practice prior to this point.
Mhm.
And I think this point is completely essential before you open up that next clinic. It's super helpful before you hire that next provider, right? Not necessary, but super helpful. But if at any time you want to expand and grow, this is fundamental to that process. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of chiefs, not enough Indians. They're going to create their own culture your that's not by intention. It's not what you create. It's what the group decides to create in spite of you. Um, and so this becomes a pain point for many owners, right? Creating
Yeah.
this fun foundation.
Yeah, man. I talk to owners all the time. Many of you guys, many of you listeners, I've talked to you on the phone or on Zoom, and I'd say 80 to 90% of you all want the same thing. You want freedom. You want time with your family. You want to be present. You want to have dinner with your family at night. You don't want to be a slave to your business. And unfortunately, this is the only way to achieve that, right? You have to develop structure. You have to develop systems.
So when I started coaching you a number of years ago, you didn't have any of this stuff together. You
None of it.
had a clinic with a partner. He didn't have any of that stuff together. And as I started coaching you, I expressed the importance of this to you, or at least I relayed that, the importance of it to you at the time. What was it that, how did you eventually start getting some of this stuff done? Did you have to set aside, did you have to block time? Did you have to force yourself? Did you have reminders, or how did you do it?
Yeah, I didn't really go full tilt into this until I had about two, maybe two and a half providers on my team. I was actually able to breathe a little bit, and I would just block off like 4 hours a week, a chunk of 4 hours. And I would just sit in front of my computer and I just started printing off all the things I had ever written down and starting to try to get it in. I have to put my hands on it, right? I put it in a way, in a chronological order that made sense for me, and then kind of start brain dumping, you know? And then it's kind of like playing with Play-Doh. In the beginning, it's like it's just this ball of nothing, but then over time it starts to actually take form and take shape. And once it starts taking shape, it turns into a tool that you can actually use, right? So I think it just takes a little bit of trust and a willingness to just kind of jump in and start using your creative energy. But I think the biggest challenge that I had as I sit back and reflect during that time is, we are so used to, well, maybe not we, but I was so used to just kind of being able to envision what the result I wanted, and then just doing it.
Mm.
I would just do it, right? And so it would be like idea, do, idea, do. And what I didn't realize is that there was actually a process, a decision-making process, algorithm, if you will, that was happening inside my brain that I didn't really realize I was doing, but I was just kind of doing it, right? And it took me some quiet time to be like, okay, why do I do that? Like, okay, first I turn the computer on, right? And then I clicked the button. And then once I see this, then I do that. And once I do that, then I do this. And then I had to kind of like slow things down, right? And dissect my decision-making process throughout the company, how I do intake, how I do hiring, how I do all those things. And it's a skill, right? And once you kind of get
Mhm.
used to using that part of your brain, it becomes you can access it a little quicker. You just have to practice it.
Right. And we mentioned this in the last episode, and I'm sure you're willing to share. And so I'll say it again on this episode. S Some of the procrastination or the hesitancy in going moving forward on creating policy and procedures, org boards, and job descriptions and this kind of stuff in my past had to do with, I don't even know where to start. What does that look like? So using the template that you recommended that you shared, reach out to you, Adam at ptoclub.com. You're more than willing to share what a job description looks like and what are
Sure.
some of the important elements. And I think for me, at least, as if I had that template and I maybe some idea of what some of the verbiage should be and how it's organized, I can throw in my own language now and
Hmm.
just get
Hmm.
rolling. And but my obstacle is I can't envision what that looks like. So if I have a template that's done, then I can just replicate that, and it works, right? And so it's become, like you said, a little bit easier for me to now create policy and procedure. Like this last week, I knew that we wanted to do conferences going forward. We have this first one coming up in September 2024 in Clearwater. If you don't know, ppoclubevents.com. So make sure you register. Um, but we plan on having annual conferences, and I don't want to recreate this wheel every time.
Hmm.
So I sat down and like, okay, now I have an idea of what some of the moving parts are, and what and a semi idea of what the timeframes are. Now I can go back and start building this process out so that come this time next year, I can go back to this policy and just follow it. Right.
That's right.
And that's the whole idea, is that you can get to that point where you can create policy and procedure for your team. And then once you do it, and ideally, if you have some other people around you, and this is my next question for you, if you have some other people around you that are skilled and professional and trustworthy and highly productive, they can start creating some of these policies for you as well. And have you been able to get to that point where some of the leaders in your team are creating policy?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Cool.
Eventually, as you part of the journey that you go through or go down as an owner is you're just figuring it out, right? Like you don't have all the answers, especially in the beginning. Your job is to just kind of put your gloves on and start swinging and figure it out, right? But in the beginning, there's so much that you don't know that there's just massive amounts of overwhelm,
Mhm.
right? But once you start to elevate your skill set and have more perspective on what you're doing with your role, then you can get to, like, as you're tackling new things, you're already, like, as you're doing it, you're already thinking about, like, how do I train somebody else to do this,
Mhm.
right? As opposed to doing it for 10 years and then figuring out how to train somebody. You're doing it the first time you're doing it. So that way it's only going to land on your plate for maybe a quarter, and then it's already gone. You're already delegating it. So once you get that good at it, then you can train other people, like, this is the SOP on how we create SOPs,
Mhm. What is
right? And then
SOP?
you standard operating procedure, right? Here's the
Right.
policy and procedure. Here's the template, if you will, on how we create training, how we create checklists, how we create to-do lists.
Yeah, and they should have been exposed to this already, right? So this isn't
Exactly.
it isn't foreign to them. And you know, a couple of things. You said you started writing down your thought processes. We're willing to share with you a template of what that patient care coordinator job description looks like. Did you get any inspiration from other books to in the creation of these things as well, or other, like, I know Traction has some good stuff in regards to organization board,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
I think I've referenced it enough, somewhere around page 90 to 100 or something like that. Um, we actually hired somebody to do our employee handbook, to, just this pamphlet of pages that explained all the HR policies, and it was well spent $2,000 to get this professional to just do it for us and make it state specific to our state laws. It was a beautiful thing. But was there anything else where you got some help in how to organize and put this stuff together?
I'd say Traction is probably the best place to start. And then aside from that, just coaching. I mean,
Yeah.
I've worked with probably 10 or 15 coaches at this point. So coaching is probably the biggest thing. But yeah, Traction is a good place. And then, there's tons of stuff on YouTube,
Yeah.
information. I mean, you can get it stuff anywhere, how to put together policy, procedure, organizational board.
I liked Mike McAllowitz Pumpkin Plan, and I in my most recent clinic, I worked with BCMS,
Hmm.
and they're a compliance company, but BCMS provided all the, like, regulatory stuff, like, the things that we had to have at a federal and a state level according to our state guidelines. And so it was really nice that they provided all of that, so that I didn't have to put together the regulation part of it, in terms of the documentation that had to be had, and this is the this is the practice act for our state, and we follow these guidelines. They had that all together, and it was even online, so I didn't have to print it out, but it was available, and they updated it. So there are resources like that as well that I'd recommend people have, but it doesn't come back to how do we do things in our clinic. This is how we answer the phone. This is what the job means for patient care coordinator. This is their KPIs. This is how we're going to review you, that kind of stuff. That's all stuff that we still had to come up with on our own.
Yep. I totally agree. Totally agree.
So let's start a higher level, on the organizing board. Well, there's different ways I've heard of it: organizing board, organizational board, organization board, whatever it is. There's different ways to do it, but it's your typical tree pattern of the organization, right? With your board of directors at the top, followed by the CEO and president, and then the different divisions. And typically, those divisions across the board, this was our version, could be varied a little bit, might even be different a little bit from Traction, but we had, like, HR related stuff, right? Finance, operations, and sales. Did yours vary much from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our board right now is marketing, recruiting, operations, finance. think that's, and then we also have an administration as well. So, yeah, so it's recruiting, marketing, operations, administration, finance. So there's five
Mm,
departments.
yeah, I gotcha.
And that's just that's how I do it. It doesn't mean how you
Totally.
have to do it. It's just that's what works for me. You
That
know,
works for the way your brain works, and that's
that's right.
perfect.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I gotcha. Cool. And when you say operations, that operations is typically the biggest part, right? Operations is where all the physical therapy actually happens.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's in operations. Operations usually includes quality assurance as well. And so operations is the major portion. That is the thing that keeps the business humming, and the other things are helpful. But that's typically how we laid it out as well. And when you start off with this organizing board, it's important to have it just to have the titles in place. And initially, as a young owner, you're going to have your name in all of those, right? So you're going to
that's
have the
right.
title of each. You're going to have board of directors, CEO, director of recruiting, director of marketing, director of operations, you name it. We call them VPs of the different divisions. And mine and Will's name showed up 5 or 6 times across that
Mhm.
organizing board before we started moving people up into those seats, right? But it's good to have the visual because you can show this to your team and say, this is what our organization looks like. This is where you are. And if it's a provider, they're going to be somewhere down the line. There's directors, and then there's the director of operations, then there's probably clinic directors that report up to that director or VP, whatever you call. And then there's going to be providers underneath that clinic director, and technicians and PTAs, all going to be in line going up vertically in that division. And so you can take a PT or a technician and say, this is where you are in the organization board right now. And not only do these lines show lines of authority, if you will, but they also show lines of communication. And so I think it's really important to show that kind of visual for people when you're talking about org board and make it part of the onboarding process. We had it in our clinics. We had the organizing board posted in the break room of each of our clinics, so they knew what the
Yep.
organization looked like, who to talk to, where the authority lines go, and who's over what. So they had a good idea of who's over what their responsibilities are, as well as where I fit in the organization. And it seemed like people just really liked having that visual. Somehow it provided some kind of mental clarity.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I got a fly running around my room. So, um, the two places that I have seen this really be helpful for us in our company is, like you mentioned, one, communication. Communication becomes a lot more challenging as you get more people, right? So who goes to who for what? You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean that I can't talk to other people along the board, but like there are conversations that are reserved for a specific person in the company, and if they get out to too many people, then that's when confusion starts to develop,
Mhm.
and that's not good, right? And
Mhm.
so, we've all had to learn those lessons of and challenges of communication. So communication is huge, and is, I would be willing to bet, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why people get burned out, because they have lack of control over the communication in their company.
Mhm.
And then the second thing is accountability, right? It doesn't necessarily directly highlight the accountability all the time, but who owns it? Who owns it? And this can be a very good starting point to help you get clear on who should own this part of the company, who should own this part of the process.
Mhm.
Because if everybody owns it, then nobody owns it,
Right.
right? And so that's really where I found the most help with org board communication and accountability.
Yeah, as we really built out our organization board and spent more time on it, in those boxes, we had a title, and the name for that title that would change over time as people left the organization or moved up into the organization to take those seats. Um, and then in that same box were what was their main product. So if it's a provider, it's your product is to have happy patients that are referring their friends and family to you, right?
Right.
Getting great
That's right.
results.
That's
And
right.
then their KPIs, how do we measure that product? Well, it's number of patients seen. For
Hmm.
them, it's also number of skilled units billed per visit, right? So we had a number of KPIs specifically to that provider box. Right. And that's exactly what you're talking about. How do they know that they're performing in that role in the company? And what are we holding them accountable to on a quick, easy visual?
Yeah. You ever use Google Maps?
Yeah.
You zoom all the way out and you just see the globe and you're like in space. That's the org board, right? Now, if you want to like, that's why it's like, okay, now I've got my whole head is wrapped around the whole company at that point. And then if you want to zoom in a little bit closer, if let's say you want to go down to the country level, right? Like where there's some dividing lines between parts. Now you're talking about what, like job specific job descriptions inside of each of these departments, right?
Right.
PTs, front desk, marketing people, digital marketing people. And so that's when you start getting into the job description,
Mhm.
kind of zooming in more detail, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. And and on an org board, these are high level items that we're putting in there. We're not putting a lot of description
Right.
into these boxes. That these are just the most important parts of regarding that position. Right.
Yep. Yep.
And so it becomes exciting for people. I had an experience where I had a PTA, and at one point we had a coach that was coaching Will and I as the owners, but also we made her available to some of our leadership team to
Mhm.
coach them separate from us, and that was hugely valuable. But she took one of our PTAs who that was doing some marketing, but also working as a PTA in the provider space, and she brought her over to the org board, and we had this, and it was big. We had like a 6 foot by 4 foot org board. And she said, "Where do you want to go in the company?" And she like started tearing up. She's like, "Wait, are you serious? Like,
Mhm.
I could move somewhere higher up?" And she's like, "Yeah, if it was up to you, where would you want to go?" She's like, "I want to go there." And it was the VP of marketing. And for her to have that visual and to have that space to dream
And
and
perspective.
aspire and have the visual perspective was huge.
Yeah.
So now she knew what she was driving for. And
Mhm.
when we told her, yeah, that's a total possibility, she's like, shut up. I never would have thought in my million years you guys would let me do that. We're like, yeah. So that was a great experience that I had with the org board. And it was really helpful for us. And it's helpful, I think, for the young owners to, like I said, visualize where they're at, what they're doing, and know where we've talked about leadership development. Okay, where are they going? What are you moving them up to? and and not to discount the communication lines that it puts in their space. So you're if you're a provider, you don't go over and talk to the marketing person and tell them what to do. You talk to your lines of authority go up to the clinic director.
Right. Right.
And if you have some ideas, you talk to the clinic director, and maybe the clinic director will go talk to the director of marketing.
Correct.
Hey, here's some ideas, right?
Mhm.
So it
That's
keeps them,
awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. The thing that comes to mind for me is just like what a great gift that you could give somebody, like you put in all that work and you build that awesome opportunity for people. That's when it gets fun.
Right. Right. So we talked a little bit about job descriptions in the last episode, so we might not have to get into it too much. You're
Sure.
willing to offer a template for it, but tell me a little bit about how you built out your job descriptions, and what made it easier for you, or what was a challenge that you had regarding building those out.
Same, just looking at a blank piece of paper. Where do I start? You know? And I think you can just Google some basic job descriptions, and you can start getting some perspective on how you could start. And by the way, you can do it any way that you want. And I'm not a job description expert. And by the way, I mean I would have to pull out a job description to give you the exact details of everything that's on ours. But in general, like you would want to start with the purpose of the position. What's the purpose? What's the product? Right? What are the key roles? What are the key responsibilities? And how do we measure success in the role? And if you do that, and then maybe some basic requirements, must pass, have a license, you must
Yeah.
graduate from the leadership program and whatever it is, right? So
Yeah.
if you have your purpose, your product, your key roles and responsibilities, and
Like KPIs. Yeah.
your stats on how you measure performance, and then some requirements
Right.
to be approved, then that's a great place to start.
You know, I'm a little bit older, and so I want to say um, that I would assume that AI could do a lot of this for you
Oh
now.
yeah, come on now.
Because even when you were doing it 4 years ago, I don't think AI
AI
was,
didn't have wasn't a thing.
yeah, it wasn't ubiquitous like it is now. But now that there is AI, you can put in the proper prompt and just say, hey, I'm a physical therapy clinic owner. I need a job description for a front desk person um, with a purpose, product, the KPIs and requirements for the position. And that will probably get you 60 to 70% of the way there.
Mm, mm,
Right. And you could
mm.
probably do that with any other position on the org board. And then you can take that and just start individualizing it, customizing it, making it your own, right? And ask for 2 or 3 different versions and then compare that with what Adam shares with you. And so creating a job description does not have to be that hard. But I think one of the issues that I also come up against, and we had to remind our leadership team, was it's okay if it's not perfect right now. We're going to roll this out, and there are going to be problems with it, and we're going to find out, and we're going to take those opportunities to change it and modify it. So when we bring it out to our team, we're like, hey, this is version 1.0.
Right.
We expect there to be problems. We
There's
expect
gonna
it
be
not to answer all the questions.
10,000 more versions. Just hang
Yes,
tight, you know?
this is a living, breathing document, but this is how what we're going to start with, and this is how we're going to train, and this is what we're going to hold you accountable to until we find modifications that we have to make. So as long as we were clear with that, that it doesn't have to be perfect, let's just get started on something and implement it right away.
Yeah. As I heard you talk, I had a really great framework or mindset around why this is important that I wanted to share. You know, it took me a while to recognize or realize that, you're not writing this stuff down on paper just so you can say like, I'm cool, I've got something written down on paper, right? Like this is a tool that you use. And I don't know if you guys ever see the ads for Trainual.
Mhm.
I've never used Trainual. I know some people who do. Supposedly it's a great product, but one of their ads is like, having your policies and procedures is having the smartest employee you could ever imagine that will never quit. They know everything about your company. They know there's nothing they don't know about your company.
Mhm.
So what this does is you basically remove yourself as the person that tells everybody what to do, and you give it to this person called your policies and procedures or your job descriptions. And now that is the decision-making process in the company. And you have to be willing to be like, I'm going to be okay with what I have written down being the decision maker.
Mm.
Right. Right. And so like, if you're making wrong decisions, it's not, oh, let me try harder next time. It's let's fix the policy. Let's fix the document. Right. And whenever you can let go of that decision making authority and give it to your system, right? Give it to your policy, then you can let it manage your employees. You can let it manage your team.
Yeah, the creator of Trainual was actually in Will and my uh, I'm sorry, entrepreneurs organization, EO. It's a national organization of small business owners, and he was in there, and he actually worked with one of our mentors, Scott Fritz, who I've had on the podcast in the past, because this was a common experience for all owners, just building this out. And he wanted to digitize it, make it easier. He eventually created Trainual, and they're killing it right now. So uh, the the thing about it that was really powerful for us, especially towards the end, prior to selling, was employees would come to us with questions as they do, knock on the door. Hey, you got a minute? And they'd ask
Mhm.
us a question. And if it was related to policy and procedure, we would say, what does the policy and procedure say? What does the employee handbook say? Did you already check that? And they're like, no, that's the first place you go.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't have an answer, talk to your supervisor and see what solutions you can come up with or what policy needs to be created so that we can create the policy so that this the next time someone asks this question, it gets answered. Right. So going back to you, it's the smartest, most important employee that knows everything about your organization. and then you can start directing people towards it to get their answers. That's when it no longer becomes a book up on the shelf that's collecting dust. That's when it becomes a living, breathing document that can really guide your team and show them this is how we do things. This
Mhm.
is this is how we maintain production. This is how we maintain our culture. This is what we believe creates the best results for our patients and for our team members. And so it should, if we follow it, it will give us the expected results that we want.
You know what that sounds like to me? Dinner with your family. Sounds like some freedom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on now. Like, how else are you going to, how else? Give me another solution. Like, this is the only thing you got. Like, if you want freedom, this is it right here. Create more freedom. You create more structure. You create more guides for your team. Stop answering so many questions, and let the document answer your questions.
And the interesting thing is it's not a one and done process. We talked about going back to it, but think about this, going from one clinic to two clinics, you're going to learn more policy and procedure such that you create an SOP for opening a clinic.
Yeah.
Right. So now when you're looking to open a clinic, or your director of operations or your director of marketing is like, hey, I think there's a great opportunity over here in this space. Well, we're going to have a checklist of, does that location meet these criteria that we expect to have for a new location, number one? And if we do press the button and say go, because it's met our checklist of expected data, then here, let's open up the next policy. And this is how we open a clinic.
Hmm.
Right. So at that point, guess what? Does the owner have to do all the heavy lifting? No, they can turn it over to somebody and say, all right, this is how we open a clinic, especially if they're partnering. And that partner is part of this new clinic. They're like, hey, bro, here's our policy and procedure for opening a clinic. You're part of the leadership team and you're a partner in this thing. This is what I've created. Follow this, and we will be successful because we've done it before. Super powerful, right?
Yeah. Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So from here, you should have like your piece of paper out. I think it's chapter 7.1, right? 7A. And at the top, it's, practice management, or organizational board. And then you've got your diagram of what just a general idea of how you want to organize things in your company, right? And then section 2 is going to be job descriptions for all of the roles that are currently in your company. PT, PTA, OT, OTA, speech therapist, techs, marketing people, front desk, the front desk, the back desk. Those are two different roles, right? What do they look like?
And those are all
Anything,
underneath operations.
all underneath
Got
operations,
another
right?
tree underneath a tree.
Digital marketing assistants, right? You can even, I've seen people create job descriptions for anybody they outsource, like their accountant, their billing team, like just having kind of that. What's the expectation there? And at that point, you've got an org board with all of the roles built out, and then now you can kind of zoom in a little bit closer, right, and build the specific policies and procedures that help each person deliver on their product,
Mhm.
whatever that is, right? So policies and procedures on patient care, onboarding, hiring, intake process, everything that you do. And yeah, you do that, and you're gonna have a lot of control in your company.
Yeah, this eventually becomes as I talked about with the regulation stuff, you want to get some of the compliance paperwork. You don't want to have to figure that out. So I would recommend you finding an organization that can provide you some of the more regulatory stuff. But that combined with your org board, combined with your employee handbook, both combined with the policy and procedures, which include, so we talk about job description, but within the job description, there's going to be links to policies and procedures, how to answer the phone, how to greet, what the patient experience looks like. When they come in the door, we greet them, we say hi, Mrs. or Mr. or however we decide to salute somebody. This is what we're expecting during initial evaluation. This is how often we think about billing collections. This is how often we meet. These are the KPIs that we're expected. This is the agenda we follow in a billing collections team meeting. So all those things become a playbook, and all of those things put together become our policy and procedures manual. And it could be volumes, right? There's probably a policy and procedure manual for each division. And then there's definitely a policy and procedure manual for each position. And there's a policy and procedure manual for the CEO to maintain organization and oversight over each division. So that's when you really start having a robust policy and procedures manual. But it really starts with one point. And if you tell me where you started, but I would recommend starting on the operations division. And if you wanted to start from the ground up and go from there and then branch out over to marketing and then over to finance and recruiting, I don't know, where did you start any place in particular that seemed helpful to you?
Yes. And this is the golden nugget, guys. Start on the thing that's occupying the most of your time. What are you spending? What fire are you putting out every day, all the time? And that's got you stressed out and that's impacting your ability. Like, okay, you're sitting there, you're working on something you don't want to work on. And you're like, man, I really wish I was at home working, having dinner with my family. What are you doing? Create a policy for that.
Love it.
And then delegate it. Right. And then just policies are captured. They're not created. Right. So like, don't feel like I've made the mistake. And I know we all have, of feeling like, oh, like we've got to build all these manuals and try to create all this stuff that isn't even there yet. Right. Just focus on the thing that's occupying the most time right now. And a lot of times, if you just do that, a lot of things almost take care of themselves, you know? So capture the policies instead of creating them.
I love it. We talked about the conference thing. That was taking up a lot of my brain space the other day before we had our meeting with the event planner. And so I decided to put together the agenda for our meeting and just start breaking out, what do I need to know? What do I need to do in this meeting to feel like I'm on top of things? Right.
Oh, it was great too. You did a good job with that.
What are the KPIs? What is our product from this
Yep.
meeting? What are some of the things I want to make sure we address? Right. And as I started building that out, I had other, sparks of insight that I wanted to make sure I hit on there. What I thought was going to be like a 1-page thing and ended up becoming a 3-page document. But correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like it was pretty comprehensive.
Oh, it was great. And
And we
and,
had,
and it was the thing that it's the thing you've been working on.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you're like, you did it while you were working on it. You captured it, you
right.
know?
Exactly. Super helpful. Gave me some clarity, gave me answers to what that I needed at the moment. And so I love your advice. Start with a thing that's occupying your most time. Because if it's occupying your time, there's some sort of chaos that's happening that's not being controlled. So you got to organize the chaos.
That's
And
right.
when you get the data and you can get it all structured, now the chaos becomes less and less. And you go from this mass of chaos in your business. And as you implement structure and more structure, and you organize and you organize and you organize, that's when it becomes really easy to start handing those things off to other
That's
people,
right.
delegating, holding them accountable. And that then becomes, I mean, that's why McDonald's has been, the biggest fast food provider for
They got it figured
decades.
out. They figured it
Is
out before everybody else
this
did.
is because of this. Not that we're
Mhm.
trying to become McDonald's for PT, but we're, we're but there's a genius and a value. And honestly, I will say this: there is a huge value monetarily when someone comes to your company and sees a bunch of policy and procedure and a bunch of people following policy and procedure and not a bunch of people following people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if your company is people based on their decisions and the actions, then and you lose some of those people over time, then all of a sudden chaos ensues.
Mm.
But if your company is policy and procedure based, structurally based, those people that can be a revolving door and they just have to follow the policy and procedure. And that's where the value comes when you're trying to sell your company, right? If I'm the greatest provider in my clinic and I'm trying to sell and I'm hoping to leave or retire at some point, I have very little value as a company. But if I'm the owner and I'm vacationing 9 out of the 12 months a year, and the company continues to generate revenue and profit in spite of me, that's a super valuable company that someone else can buy with very little effort and see that same return, right? That's
That's
what they
right.
want. So that's where this shows up, not just in the freedom that we're talking about, but it definitely shows up in the dollars and cents,
That's right. That multiple.
right? Makes it
Um,
much bigger.
the other thing that I wanted to mention is, you start with, I would say most practice owners aren't there. They're probably like buried in too many things they're trying to do. So start with the things that are on your plate now. But once you kind of get those figured out, right? Then it becomes less about what's on your plate right now. And it becomes more about like, what are you going to do in the next 30 days? Right. So it might be like, I'm going to hire a PT in 30 days. Let me pull out the onboarding process and make a 1% improvement on it and make sure that we're ready to go. And then that way the PTs come, you get a little bit more proactive about it. Right. And then once you're able to kind of zoom out and get extremely proactive about it, then you're no longer making policies and procedures anymore.
Exactly. And this is where you've provided a ton of value for our coaching clients in the vault. And
Yeah.
in the vault in our coaching program, there's a vault of exactly like a recruiting program. You don't have to generate the policy and procedure for a recruiting
All
program.
there.
You've already thrown it in the vault, right?
That's right.
And interesting, a number of our clients still don't reference it enough, even though it's there for free for them.
Good point. I
Right.
mean, well, listen, okay. You got to step out of treatment. It's like, you've got to work on this stuff. People ask me all the like, I'm not there are people in this world who are impressed by what you've helped me be able to do. And I tell them all the time, I'm not super smart. Like, I'm just a regular dude. I'm a hard worker. But one thing that I do is I don't treat patients. And I'm spending 40 hours a week trying to make my businesses better. And like, if you're treating patients 40 hours a week and you're in the business and I'm not, after 6 months, I mean, we're going to be on different stratospheres. You know what I mean? You just got to step out and you got to go into it and do a different type of work.
Right. I literally saw this yesterday talking to a friend in my mastermind, and he has a friend who started a clinic 6 months before him, but he decided to get coaching and his friend has not. And his friend has done nothing, stayed the same, and just complains about it all the time. While he has grown into 2 clinics and he hardly treats it all anymore. And he's developing a leadership team now 2 years later.
Isn't it crazy?
Completely different. Started at the same. I mean, the other guy had 6 month head start on him,
Yeah,
but hasn't invested in his company.
that's right. That's right. I mean, you'd be amazed at how fast things can move if you just decide to work on the right things.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. So we talked about org board, job descriptions, policies, and procedures. Reach out to Adam if you want a little bit of a template. Reach out, look into traction for some ideas as well. Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz, I think, has some great ideas. And then next time we're going to talk a little bit more about the human side of things. So hiring, onboarding, the employee experience and employee retention, communication with them. A big part of that is recruiting. Just hold on. That's going to be the next episode after that because
Right.
it deserves a episode unto itself. And
Right.
so wait for that one. It'll be coming.
Sounds good, man.
All right. Anything else you want to add, Adam?
No, sir. Hey, if anybody needs any help, shoot me a message. You can check out the Facebook group, Private Practice Owners Club. You can email me, adam@ptoclub.com. Shoot me an email. Happy to chat with you anytime and support you in any way that I can.
Yeah. Hopefully we can see a lot of people in person at the conference in September.
Show up. Show up to the conference. Come on, guys. We need you there.
All right. See you later, man.